So originally this topic was intended just to introduce the background and why there is no formal presentation or the topic will be a bit boring, maybe. This topic was intended to be more for the OpenDaylight contributors and applications already present in the OpenDaylight about the plans, how to actually improve our APIs over how to improve and how to migrate to one model, one common model for most of the applications over the following releases, since this will take 2 releases. First is to deprecate the existing APIs, which are still not deprecated in the Lithium, and move to the new APIs in the Beryllium. And then in the Boron, just to remove the old APIs. Historically, OpenDaylight have 2 models for protocol plugins available. 2 common models which protocol plugins may use. One is the inventory model. How many of you have used OpenFlow in the OpenDaylight? Or the OpenFlow models in the OpenDaylight? Show of the hands. How many of you have used Topology model in the OpenDaylight? And all of you know that sometimes it's hard to correlate data between the inventory and the topology. And it's actually a bit mismatch that you have two different models to access the same data or same logical data, which is inventory and topology. So inventory model was introduced during the hydrogen into the OpenDaylight. Original intention behind that model was to ease the migration from the ADSAL to the MDSAL because the ADSAL has a concept of the inventory. Inventory model is pretty simple. You have a data root and underneath you have a container of the nodes which contains multiple nodes and multiple node connectors. Pretty simple, easy model, which is then augmented by protocol specific information. But this model has several disadvantages. There is only one inventory. You cannot create multiple inventories which are accessible to separate users or to have an inventory specific to the protocol. Also, the terminology in this model doesn't provide you overlay view if you are dealing with the layered networking. And as I mentioned, doesn't provide a tie-in into the topology model. Also, in the OpenDaylight, we are currently using a topology model from 2013 as was proposed in the IETF. And this model is a bit better, but also it has its own, not problems, but it also evolved. And the model proposed for the Beryllium is the advanced of that model. So the topology model has a network topology container, which is container for multiple topologies. So we have a notion of multiple topologies. Each of these topology has a notion of multiple nodes and links and termination points. And also these topologies could be underlay, overlay, and you could also express the relationship between the nodes in a way that, okay, this node is supported by the other node. So imagine that if you have a virtual switch is running on a hardware node. So you have a hardware-like topology on which you will map the virtual switches using this supporting node technology, supporting node concepts. This is a bit advanced model, but also has disadvantages. Currently, the draft, which was in the IETF, is already expired and was replaced by the IETF I2RS Yang Network Topology draft, which is an evolution of this model, which is evolution of this model, which is split into 2 different models currently. And one is a network model. The network model is really simple. You have a top-level container, you have a list of the networks which contains a node. This really seems similar to the inventory model, but then this model is augmented with the notion of the link and termination points, which are terminating a link. So it's best of the both worlds. You could use to model inventories without the links. You could use this model also to model the topologies, and it actually fails naturally because the topology is just an extension of the network model. The model, yeah, there is a list of the networks. I didn't draw that, yeah, correctly. So there are multiple networks. So you still have that nice abstract layers or namespaces that you could have a per tunnel network or per protocol network or some computed networks just to provide you with some different connectivity information. And as I mentioned, ITF network model is the base one. It contains just a notion of the nodes, networks, and supporting nodes, which is the relationship between the nodes. And then there is the augmented by ITF network topology, which introduces the links between these nodes and termination points. So this is the common framework which could be used by all the plugins in the OpenDaylight or the network-related plugins in the OpenDaylight to have a common terminology and to not have this two model problem, which is one is the inventory and one is the network topology, because this is based off one model. And the idea behind this is to start introducing this model into Beryllium and start migrating the applications to it. If the applications opt in to be migrated.
So we used the previous one, not this one, the previous one, and one of the problems that we saw, which is there in this one as well, is there was no bandwidth throttling against the termination points.
So that's the protocol-specific technology, actually, bandwidth, and that should be addressed by the augmentations. So this is the base model, and not in all topologies probably you want to have a bandwidth modeled. Because think of this model could be used for L7 topologies, which actually applications are, even the applications in the controller are creating the L7 topologies by the nature that they exchange data in some patterns. So yeah, this model could be extended by the notion of the topology, but not all the protocols export you topology-specific information. So that's why it is left out from the model. And it's left to the specific models.
Unfortunately, these models, these YAG files, they're kind of exposed to the rest of, and which goes into operators. So it would be nice to have some kind of standard around each layer. Okay, this layer has this kind of path augmentation. Layer 0, layer 1, 2.5, 3.
So yeah, these are the topology-specific augmentations. And not yet all are there. And if you have any ideas, you could propose additional models which are augmenting this with information you need. And maybe they will get adapted by the plugins which are able to export that information. Actually, there are additional 2 models to that, 3 models to that, which is an L3 connectivity topology, layer 3 IS topology, and OSPF topology. And these 3 additional topology models are used by the BGP PSEP project. There is the additional model, which is, I think there is a model for the OVSDB project for the topology model. And OpenFlow is currently still on the inventory, but I could imagine moving the OpenFlow data to the inventory.
So does OpenFlow also use this?
So OpenFlow uses the old inventory model. It doesn't use the topology model. All the other protocols in the OpenDaylight started, or the most of the, and then the problem is some of the protocols are using the inventory model as their base model. Some of the protocols are using the topology model as their base model. And actually this talk is about moving commons toward one model. So we do not have these 2 different concepts inside the OpenDaylight.
So in Beryllium, you're saying OpenFlow will also do this one?
So OpenFlow, I believe OpenFlow plugin is planning to move to the network topology model.
So it's expired draft. How? I mean, so now we're going to follow this. Is there a way to revive it and say,
We can follow it, but do we want? That's the question.
but you're going to go make the change. Is that decided to use the topology
So at least one project will be migrated to this, or 2 projects already. So it's under a plan, and what we can do actually, and this is a bit to figure it out, is we can provide tools which can migrate data between these models. So applications will still use, for example, the old model, but we will export them also via a new model. So that's one of the idea I'm playing with. So to ease the transition to newer models. Actually, this model, which currently I2RS, IETF I2RS Yang Network Topology is, it's adopted by the I2RS working group and probably has higher chance to be standardized than the older model since it's not revived. And actually, this is moving towards the standardized model.
So just from my understanding, like once overflow moves to this model, the path computation is going to be based on this.
If you want to implement it such way, yeah. Currently, I'm not aware if we have the path computation in the open source.
Sorry?
I do not believe we have a path computation engine in the OpenDaylight.
At least the path is computed, right? Like how it needs to be flow, like where the flows need to be set up.
So you mean end-to-end flow stitching? We don't have a application like that in the OpenDaylight, I believe. Current use cases of the OpenFlow in the OpenDaylight are mostly towards the neutron use case, where you don't have the OpenFlow nodes in the core of the network, and you are using the VXLAN to migrate you are using the VXLAN to achieve the connectivity. End-to-end flow stitching, I do not believe there is an application for end-to-end flow stitching in open source OpenDaylight. So the OSPF, I mentioned the OSPF and ISIS topologies. These are the topologies which are used in BGP PSEP project, which are exported by the BGP LS protocol. There is no component which is installing the flows according to path computation in the open source OpenDaylight. If you look at the project scopes of the release projects, I think none of the projects is doing that. But I may be a bit ignorant, we have a lot of projects, so.
Because when we have a mesh of like L2 switches,
Oh, L2 switch, yeah, L2 switch is doing the computation on the path, I believe, on the topology.
right.
Oh, I forgot about that project. Because yeah, the most OpenFlow use cases are not the L2 switch, but the neutron. So they are not, and neutron usually doesn't use the L2 switch or the flow stitching. It just uses the flows just to do local routing on the particular node, and then you are using the VXLANs or Thomas. What you are using for for node-to-node communication in GBP?
VXLAN tunnels.
Yeah, VXLANs?
Yeah.
And OVSDB project, same?
Yeah.
VXLANs. So they are not doing the end-to-end flow stitching.
So also, I've noticed that I2RS also has an inventory model, which augments this, the one you're showing right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So what it's I noticed a few days back, like so it's called like DOM I2RS network inventory model. It is just augmenting the node in which you just show here, the I2RS node.
Okay.
So the question is, are you going to follow that, or are you going to?
That's not a question for me. That's a question for the projects if they want to follow that model. I'm here for the really just MDSAL controller perspective, which means we are not, which means I cannot mandate things. I can just advise them. And this is the decision for the project leads and for particular projects if they will export their data into I2RS inventory model, or even if the I2RS inventory model is able to describe their data. That's the other question. I can still, always, I can imagine, for example, we have a netconf. Netconf is exporting data to the topology. Netconf has currently introduced its own augmentation because netconf needs to export very specific set of the data. Netconf is capability-driven protocol. So, for example, it needs to list all the capabilities, netconf-specific capabilities, which are accessible to that node. OpenFlow is also a really specific protocol. So there are OpenFlow augmentations to the inventory, or maybe in Beryllium there will be to the topology, which are exporting the OpenFlow specific information. You don't want to lose protocol specific information actually in the topology. And in addition to that, you may want to provide the additional common information if it is doable. But in some protocols, and that's the harder part, is to define what's the common information model for all the protocols. And it will get to the point that common information model for all the protocols is there is a node, and that's all to it. Because, for example, you could imagine using the topology, you could use the topology model to represent BGP systems and how they are connected. There is no bandwidth involved. So bandwidth is not part of the common topology model. Or you could go to the OpenFlow. OpenFlow models a ports. Ports has their properties. But given that just I'm looking at one OpenFlow node, I know the configuration, I know what bandwidth is available on that port, but I cannot determine what bandwidth is available on the link. So bandwidth is not part, even not part of the OpenFlow model. And you could go protocol by protocol and rule out all the things you have there, and you will be left out with the notion that really common model for all the protocols is there is a node. And maybe there are links. Maybe. Usually they are, but they are not directly mentioned in the protocol. It's up to the individual plugins, applications, if they fit into the sum model or not. You actually cannot make something fit into the model you choose. And that's the thing which is people are usually trying to find in the SDN. There is a common golden northbound model. There is none. There will be none. The ones you have multiple protocols or you are doing the multiple use cases, there is none common model. There are some basic primitives, and then there is use case protocol specific information. That's, for example, why we choose Yang, actually, is to not lose this information. To actually allow us to use as something really small and common, and then augment the protocol specific information on it. Any other questions? So, as mentioned, this idea is to introduce this new model into the OpenDaylight, into Beryllium, and get the applications present in the OpenDaylight to migrate to it. So that was much more like discussion topic with the other projects. The other aspect of this migration is how it affects the APIs. So we use each. In the original model, when I wanted to read the topology, the URL is a bit superfluous. RESTconf operational / network topology, network topology / network topology / topology name. With the newer model, it's much more shorter. RESTconf / operational IETF network model, network topology ID. The reading node from the topology, you could see the difference. In the inventory model, it's RESTconf operational OpenDaylight inventory node ID. In the topology model, it's longer. It's network topology, topology name, node ID. And in the latest model, it's IETF network name, node ID. Shorter, better readable for end users of the REST APIs. From the Java perspective, so in the Java, we are using the instance identifiers, which are, if you look at that and you are not aware of the Java APIs, we had instance identifier is practically like REST-COM view URI to read the data. All the inventory code for creating the path to the node in the model is create nodes class, child node class, node key, topology, and in the new model, it's similarly short as in the original inventory model, but these bits maybe improve the readability of the APIs. And finally, links difference. In the old topology model, you get to the network, then you go to the augmentation, which says that the network has also topology information available, topological information available, and you will get the link there. And that's pretty much what I prepared. So, follow-up questions? Which one you are interested in? Could you come closer or repeat? No, this is actually my notes which I were taking to have a discussion with the contributors on the other projects. I weren't aware that this will be much more presentation-like. Okay. I prepared notes, not slides.
We are using the inventory module right now.
Yeah.
For the notifications. Okay. Now we need to do some changes based
So,
on.
yes and no. Given that the inventory model wasn't deprecated in the Lithium, your code will work fine on the Lithium, work fine in the Beryllium, not in the Boron. These are actually, these are my notes, which I plan to make part of the migration guide if we start executing on that. So basically, you are safe for the Lithium and Beryllium. In the Boron, this API, all the deprecated APIs will not be available. So in the OpenDaylight, the API policy is if we deprecate something in one release, so if I'm going to deprecate the APIs in the Beryllium still has these APIs. These APIs will be removed in the following release, which is Boron. Or first, or will be removed, it's not correct. We can remove them in the Boron. We may not, we can. So we have this one release policy, which actually gives you, given that we have SRs, which gives you practically 1 year to migrate to newer OpenDaylight, to newer APIs.
So the new API will be available in Beryllium?
Yes, not in the Lithium. This was, in my mind, this was supposed to talk about the Beryllium topics with the projects which will be in the Beryllium release.
So in his case, like since he's using inventory, and if he is putting into the config data store, like what would be the migration? Like how would he be migrating the data once, like on the customer side? Do you have any thoughts?
Migration of the data, for example, what do you mean?
Like the config data store.
You mean changing the configuration. So this migration strategy currently isn't even figured out for the Lithium, but idea here behind that is to provide the set of the utilities. In this case, the migration is mostly for plugins if they just move their models, move their augmentation to new places. It's really simple. We will just take data from node's node and copy it to the topology, to the particular topology. And provide it as a runtime service. So in case if the models are similar. In the case the application also opts out or the plugin changes their model in non-compatible way, they need to provide an API for data conversion, probably. But that is not maintained, and I cannot comment on what for the plugins which are outside of my scope will do. So this depends. If you are asking about the OpenFlow, you need to ask OpenFlow plugin folks. I cannot comment on that.
I think it's also just a bigger question, because this came up in the last general controller migration. Generalized solution. Yeah.
So actually, yeah, and I cannot provide you. I'm working mostly on the MDSAL itself. So that means my code doesn't understand your data. So I cannot migrate it. So that's the question that's mostly the question for the OpenFlow plugin folks, question for OBSDB folks, and for the others. How they plan to migrate their data if these changes will be ongoing, but this is just simple cases here. What changed maybe over the time when we will changing the APIs. The other thing is actually they will be changing their models even if we will not go, for example, with this idea, they will be changing their models. So that question is still valid for them.
So typically, when the like in the database, when the schema changes,
Yeah, you have a migration scripts.
so like in those cases, the application is not brought up. It's only the database which is brought up, and then external scripts are run to kind of move.
I know.
So the thing is, to access the data store, the controller needs to be up. But if the controller is up, then it stops working. So
No.
is there, no?
So what's the controller?
Sorry?
My really used question. What is the controller?
What is a controller?
Yes. What is the controller in your mind? That's the first question I'm asking.
Controller in my mind is what gets deployed at the customer side where
So that means the data store plus the applications.
yes.
Well, you need to, yeah, in that case, if you need to convert the data, you probably need to bring up the controller only, plus the core, only the applications which are the data store and so on, and then probably migration scripts for the applications, and later on you need to bring up the applications.
What you're saying is just bring up the controller and bring up the migrate the applications.
Yeah, the solution will be probably started, we will start the controller, the MD-SAL along with the data store, along with the application-specific migration scripts, and applications will be brought up later. But since we are one process, that's why I asked what do you mean by the controller. So that's probably the way to do it, but it was not meant, but the problem is currently for helium to lithium upgrade, it wasn't mandated by the release plan to provide these scripts, so a lot of the applications didn't give even thought to it yet. We'll provide it probably sometime along the lines. In the beryllium, it will be better handled, but I cannot comment on what applications do. Mostly what, for example, in the MDSAL we are trying to provide them enough functionality to do that, but we cannot enforce them to do that. That's the difference. So the controller project itself and the Enctools project, we cannot enforce the applications to provide the migration scripts. We can just provide them utilities to ease their migration. And actually one of the items in the beryllium is to introduce a set of the data migration utilities for the MDSAL, and part of this, what I mentioned, that we will copy the data to the another topology. This is part of this data migration utilities, which are intended for the application developers inside the OpenDaylight to ease the migration path, to ease the developing their migration script for them. But we cannot do that automatically.
So, but are these utilities part of a separate project or
They will be part of the Enctools MDSAL project, probably, and controller tailored to a specific model. So it's on the release plan. Not sure how much we will deliver of them, how many. That needs to be still figured out, and this is the venue to figure it out. If anyone is willing to contribute, contributions are welcome. You can help actually to realize this story.
So, is it possible that some of these apps, like OpenFlow plugin or someone else who's augmenting to this current model,
Yeah.
is it possible that one of those projects migrates to the new model
And the other doesn't.
the other doesn't?
Yeah.
And so, let's say the users like us, when we use it, we realize realize, oh, Beryllium, some of them migrated, some didn't. So
no, and that's why I'm saying, that's why I try to push for the deprecation, because they will make them to migrate. Because in the next release, I cannot, as a project which is hosting this model, I cannot promise them it will be there.
Sure, but you said there's still some time for them to migrate. So there could be one release where someone has migrated some project,
Yeah.
but not the other. So users like us could end up with two parts of trees where inventory is
And
here
that's, I have an ideas for that. We have a really nice project where we could execute that. This is called the Topology Processing Framework, which we can actually bit extend to, okay, this application is in the old topology model, so let's re-export everything which this application is exporting to the new topology model. So from the user perspective, you will get the new topology model, even if the application internally is using the old topology model. That's the nice thing about the model-driven approach, that you could build the utilities like that, but that needs still exploration and some help maybe from you folks.
But in that solution, you're saying the network maybe gives sending real-time updates, discovery, it goes in the old model and updates, but this in real time it will propagate it.
Yeah. So you will not see the difference. That's the model-to-model translation, which we plan to start introducing into the OpenDaylight, which allows you for that real-time upgrades. So, and it will be separate package. So it will be build it the similar technique using the similar techniques like MDSAL, which allows you to provide that service for any model which is based on the topology model, for example. So any application will get benefit of this, even if they didn't yet migrate, they have new APIs there, and they can have their time to move internally.
Is this something that's just started, this project, or utility, or this idea suggests?
So that's currently in the design phase. And the idea was, actually my idea when I was asked to create a developer forum topics, I was thinking that this will be much more like the Design Summit last year, which was mostly the contributors and developers on the application that we will figure out the details here. And also the work items. So any other questions? I think we could wrap this up and give you your time back.